First impression, I think, of the CUSP exhibition is the breadth in which design's represented. So the breadth across fields beyond just architecture or product design. And so I think what we're seeing here is sort of introducing to people a range of design fields which are not always known. So there's an element of surprise and I guess exploring design as a sector for people and where it can have impact. I think for me, the ideas that resonated most were those that we don't often see in Australia. And for me, the diversity of those ideas, but also where they've come from, is interesting. And the fields in which they seek to make impact. So bringing, for example, wearable technology and computing and health together in the work of George Coote, for example. Highly interactive piece that asks you to have an intensely personal experience, which is visceral. And it's a way of sort of bringing that, the technological possible into the very human understandable. And I guess, again, this is important for me because design, I think, acts as that bridge between the technical and the possible and into that human and desirable. You know, it's a way of converting, it's essentially the innovation question. Design takes that idea and converts it into something, and that's a process of innovation. I think we see that across so many of the designers here, and they've brought their own experience from other places into the objects and to the ideas that they show in CUSP. So I think for me the whole program that sits around CUSP and this concept of designing into the next decade is actually about the role that object and others can play as hubs and as ways of bringing that understanding to a public. And the challenge that comes with that is making sure that the public is not the same cohort that we traditionally talk to. So for me, the exhibition becomes really important for the network that sits behind it, the objects, the jams, etc., and how we bring the researchers in, how we bring designers in, how we bring policymakers in to understand that the good news is it's actually possible. I think what you see in CUSP is an introduction to an emerging field that comes at the right time for Adelaide. So Adelaide's a transition point. We often talk about tipping points, but I think that infers a quick moment. Actually, I think Adelaide's experience is it's a transition. It takes time. And we need to be aware of the concepts around the role for technology and the influence we can play in the built environment and the new objects which will drive the way we live into the future. And through that, actually, if we're smart, it will be the new products, the new sectors, the new supply chains, the new mechanisms that we can employ to bring this sort of stuff to life at scale. And that's a particular conversation happening in Adelaide at the moment because what we're seeing really is the future of manufacturing. It's high value driven, intellectually driven products, services and ideas for a future that's evolving in front of us that we're actually in the process of playing catch up for. Adelaide in particular is ageing fast. Adelaide in particular is losing its manufacturing base, and largely because we failed to engage or invest in the design ideas that sit behind those new products. So for Adelaide, CUSP actually is, I think, the beginning and an invitation into developing some of those sectors if manufacturing is to have a future. I think CUSP plays into some megatrends, and if you look at, and they're the sort of the global shifts that are happening around us that we often don't talk about. Well, we talk about because of a reaction or a symptom that reveals itself. I think that idea of that plays into a global megatrend really around ageing and perhaps some of those social networks that we allow or we don't allow to happen in our cities. And what's important about that for me is that some of the stuff that we see here in designing for the next decade directly addresses those issues of health and of ageing and of looking after ourselves and of staying connected. And I think if we get into that, we begin to actually anticipate some of those global megatrends and where they're headed. I think the challenge at the moment is that we are locked into a reactive cycle against the megatrends that are out there. We know CSIRO has defined 6 of them, and they are really represented in the work you see here. It's about the virtual having a mirror to the physical. It's about the ageing process. It's about the economy shifting to the east, which is the time zone that we occupy. So all these things, I think, are these global megatrends evident just below the surface. And the good news about the CUSP exhibition for me is that it begins to address not where we are, but where we probably need to be. I'd like to close on a quote from a great designer called Wayne Gretzky, who played ice hockey. And he said, a good player plays the puck where it is, and a great player plays the puck where it will be. And I think for me, the exhibition in some ways plays where the puck will be.